The sound wasn't a slap. It was sharper than that, a dry crack that echoed off polished wood and stone, the kind of sound that makes your stomach drop before your brain even catches up. For half a second, nobody moved. Not the judge, not the clerk, not the rows of people pretending they were just there to observe. And standing right in front of me, hand still half raised, was Officer Mark Halden. He was smiling. Not wide, not obvious, just enough to let me know he thought this moment belonged to him. In his head, I was already shrinking, already apologizing, already beaten. He had no idea how wrong he was. I wasn't in that courthouse to make a scene. I wasn't there for headlines or drama. I was there because I promised a woman from my district I would watch her son's case because no one else with any power ever had. I was there in a plain gray suit, hair pulled back, notebook open, doing the boring, unglamorous part of public service that never makes the news. And honestly, that's probably why he thought he could do it. I wasn't on a stage. I wasn't behind a microphone. I was just a woman in his space. Everyone in that building knew Mark Halden. They didn't say his name out loud much, but they knew him. He was big, loud, decorated, the kind of officer people described as old school when they really meant dangerous. Complaints followed him like a shadow, but somehow never stuck. Files went missing, cameras glitched. Witnesses changed their minds. Guys like him don't survive on strength alone. They survive because people decide it's easier not to look too closely. It started during a recess. I stood up to stretch and step into the aisle, and he moved right into my path. Not a stumble, not confusion, a block. I said, "Excuse me, officer," polite enough, clear enough. He didn't move. He leaned down, chewing gum like it was his last defense. "Sit back down," he said, like he was talking to a child. I told him I was allowed to move. He told me in this room he decided what was allowed. When I tried to step around him, his hand clamped onto my arm. Hard. Not a warning, a grip. I felt my skin pinch under his fingers. That's when I raised my voice, not to provoke him, but so people would hear. "Take your hand off me." And that's when he snapped. The slap came fast, sideways, full force. The sound was sickening. My head turned, my cheek burned, and the room inhaled all at once. For a heartbeat, I stayed still. Not because I was stunned, but because I was choosing. People like him count on panic, on shock, on the moment where you doubt yourself. But before I was a councilwoman, before I wore suits and shook hands, I grew up learning how to stand my ground. I shifted my weight, turned my hips, and drove my fist into his jaw with everything I had. Clean. Precise. He went down like a switch had been flipped. No words, no warning. Just gravity doing its job. The next part happened fast and slow at the same time. Officers rushed in, grabbed me, shoved me onto a table, twisted my arms behind my back. I kept saying I'm not resisting. He hit me. Nobody listened. They never do in that moment. By the time the cuffs clicked, Mark Halden was already being called a victim. I was already being called a problem. They put me in a holding cell in the basement. Cold bench, bare walls. My face throbbed where he'd hit me. And upstairs, the story was being written without me. By the time night fell, the headlines were everywhere. Public official attacks officer, courtroom meltdown. According to the official statement, I'd lost control. According to them, he'd never touched me. And wouldn't you know it, the courtroom cameras had malfunctioned right at the crucial moment. I spent the night listening to guards laugh and whisper outside the bars. One of them dragged his baton along the metal just to hear the sound. "You really messed up," he said. I stared straight ahead and thought about how familiar that sentence sounded. I'd heard it my whole life, every time I refused to stay in my place. My lawyer, Daniel Ross, met the cameras the next morning. He looked calm, which I knew meant he was furious. He said I'd been assaulted. He said we'd prove it. Reporters smiled like they were humoring a child. Then, 2 days later, the internet did what it does best. A law student who'd been sitting in the back had caught a few seconds of video on his phone. Shaky, vertical, but clear. You could hear Mark Halden's voice. You could see his arm swing. You could see my head snap back. By sunrise, millions had watched it. And that's when the pressure shifted. Not toward him, toward me. I got a call from an unknown number. A calm voice told me I should consider a plea deal, told me mistakes happen, told me my brother had a past that could become very inconvenient. Drugs have a way of appearing where they weren't before. Prisons are dangerous places. The message was clear. Win this, and you lose something else. I sat in my apartment staring at the wall trying to breathe. Daniel said if I folded, Halden would walk free. I believed him. I also believed they were capable of ruining my family. 10 minutes before the next hearing, I was ready to lie. I was ready to say I overreacted. And then everything changed again. A journalist named Lena Moore burst into the room phone in her hand, eyes wild. She showed me a live stream. Hundreds of people standing in front of a prison transport van. Neighbors, strangers, people I'd fought for quietly for years. Cameras everywhere. The van wasn't moving. My brother was safe. The leverage was gone. Back in court, the mood was different. The judge looked nervous. Halden looked smaller. When Daniel revealed a backup server the city claimed didn't exist. The real footage played. Clear. Wide angle. No excuses. The slap. The lie. Even Halden pretending to be unconscious longer than he was. You could feel the room turn against him. Then the door opened again and an older woman walked in leaning on a cane. Halden's mother. She didn't look at me. She looked at him. She told the court she raised him better than this. She handed over a notebook he'd left at her house. Dates, names, notes about people he'd taught lessons to. The room erupted. He cried. Not for the victims, for himself. The jury didn't deliberate. Not guilty. The words barely landed before the noise hit. Halden was handcuffed right there. As they led him away, he looked at me waiting for something. Anger. Celebration. I just said quietly, "You thought I'd break." Months later, a kid asked me if I'd been scared. I told her the truth. I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's what you do while your hands are shaking. And now, I want to ask you something. Was justice served here, or did it only work because the whole world was watching? How many people never get their moment because no one hits record? Tell me what you think. I want to hear it.